Welcome to What's Possible, Conversations with World-Class Coaches. Thank you for being here today. I am really excited for this conversation with my dear friend and colleague, Catherine Britton. Catherine and I came up with this topic for today because we started thinking about where we are right now in the world with so much change, so much transition, so much being asked of our managers, and how they lead is really going to make a difference as we move forward. And we said we really need to make sure that managers start to be coaches. And there's a lot that you'll read about this in Harvard Business Review. I know has put out some articles. Catherine's written about this. And we thought, you know what? It's time to have a webinar on this topic. So before we go dead on into this topic, I just want to introduce Catherine. Catherine is the author of Sit, Right, Share. She is a coach, obviously, for Silicon Valley Change and has been with us since the very start. Prior to that chapter of her life, she worked at IBM in technology, obviously, and then decided, you know what, I want to go back to school and study about this whole positive psychology and what does that mean and how might I be able to use that in my life and put that into the world. And so while working at IBM, Catherine went back, got her master's in applied positive psychology at the University of Pennsylvania, and after that, launched into her coaching career. And then she has also been a writer, editor. Many of the books on our site, if you peruse the Coach Carousel, Catherine has been integral in helping those coaches get their books out of the head and into the world. So, Catherine, I would love to introduce you to our show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me. What a wonderful way to end the year.
Yes, I agree. You're spot on, and it's been quite a year. And I think we're going to go into another quite a year. So I'm glad that we can help prepare people. I always like to start with a definition. Everybody can create their own definition about things that we're talking about, and it's so important that we have a working definition. So when we think about managers becoming coaches, what does that even mean to you?
Well, largely it means that managers, instead of always giving directions to their people and say, do this like this, that they actually are looking at helping their employees become even better versions of themselves. So and they do it through a combination of asking questions, listening, playing back to people what they hear, maybe making suggestions, but usually asking permission before they make suggestions. But basically, the idea is just as a really good parent tries to help a child become an even better version of who they really are, as opposed to mold them in some specific shape that the parent wants them to be. By coaching, managers are thinking in terms of bringing out the best of what's there in the employees without trying to turn them all into exactly the same kinds of contributors. So there's a tendency with coaching to back off, ask questions, think about what you hear, maybe play it back to the person that you're talking to, and then ask questions that make people go even further. And the upshot of it is, with really good coaching, the person who's being coached, in this case the employee, hears their own best ideas come out of their own mouths rather than hearing it come down from above. And so what's happening here is that the manager is creating the conditions that let people grow into better versions of their own selves.
Yeah.
How does that fit with your ideas of coaching?
Yeah, great. I think you're spot on. And the thing that always comes to my mind with coaching, just as we coach other people, the essence of coaching is that question asking and reflecting. Those two components are so integral. And I think as managers, often people can feel the pressure to tell people what to do or tell people how to do it and to have all the answers inside. And so the one thing that I add on to yours, which is the essence of what you were talking about, is that we as coaches believe and hope that managers can start seeing it this way as well, is that every individual has inside their own answers, and all that they need they have, and all that they have they need. And meaning that if we can help them by asking really intuitive questions and questions that dig deeper, we can kind of excavate what's inside there. If that makes sense.
Well, I think I would actually qualify what you just said. Okay, because there's all kinds of different employees. They're brand new employees who maybe they don't have everything in them that they need. Then there's, people of middle experience where they have a lot of what they need, but a good manager also stretches them and they don't necessarily know that they have what they need then. And then, of course, you've got very experienced people who often need coaching to help them see how they could become even more of themselves. So part of what the manager has to do is has to calibrate the coaching to the person. So just as you don't take a child to a swimming pool and just throw them in and say, okay, swim, you don't throw somebody into the deep end of a job and say, just figure it out yourself. But you've got to be able to, you've got to open up the belief in the person that they actually can grow into the job. And so you don't just tell them, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. But you do try to provide them with enough direction and listen for what kind of direction they really need. So it's really a matter of, just as coaches have to actually kind of create their approach for everybody that they work with individually, managers need to do the same thing with the people that work for them.
Yeah. I really like how you said that, qualify and have it, one size doesn't fit all. And that's true with everything. And so really be able to know who you're working with. And it might be almost a hybrid. So it might be a hybrid of doing some leading and guidance so that they learn how, and then also some questioning, even at the beginning, because presumably people who come to you, even if they're newer, they still bring something to the table that's unique and different. And by asking the right questions, it allows them to start to realize their value from day one.
Exactly. But I tell you, we actually had an experience one time when we were working with a whole series of HR business partners. And the word had come down from Caesar Augustus that they were to become more coach-like in their relationships with the managers they worked with. And so one of the things that we found when we were working with them is that there are some things that in the HR field that are non-negotiable. There are ways you have to do them. You have to do them like this. You have to pay attention to these things. You can't forget about these things. And so what we ended up working out with the HR professionals that we were working with was you really need to help people. You need to figure out what the swim lanes are. So if there's a very narrow area that success needs to fit between these two narrow boundaries, don't leave it up to the person you're coaching to figure that out. Be clear with them. Your solution has to fit between these two boundaries. So one of the things as you're becoming a coach is you've got to figure out, how wide is the swim lane? How open is it to questioning? And then make it really clear so that you don't waste the person's time coming up with answer after answer that's just outside the bounds of what's possible in that field.
Yeah. And it also makes me think about kind of that safety and even psychological safety in that context of being able to have guidelines. Guidelines help us feel safe in our environment. So if you know these are the guidelines, these are the parameters, then I can exhale and be able to get to that part of my brain where I can be thoughtful because I know this is where I'm swimming. So
yes, right.
Yeah. And it is interesting. I'm finding with so many of our HR partners, they really are coming either into their world with a coaching background, or they're going to get a coaching background after being in the space of HR, again, to be able to help people come up with solutions and to be able to ask the right questions. And even during this time where when we were really in the thick of the Great Resignation, I know so many of my HR partners were starting to ask people really thoughtful questions as people were thinking about resigning, instead of saying, well, you should stay here because X, Y, and Z. Instead, they were asking questions, well, what's creating this desire to move someplace else? What are you looking for? What do you hope for? And by asking those questions, it helps the leader, the employee start to think about, well, gosh, what am I looking for? What am I hoping for? And oftentimes people ended up staying right where they were, because they hadn't been thinking of these questions and coming up with these kind of answers that were so powerful for themselves.
Well, that kind of reminds me of, the way I describe some of the coaching that I've been doing, which is helping people figure out how to be either happier and more effective right where they are, or to figure out what it is that they need differently, how to leave well if they do need to leave, and then how to get a good start. So those are all wonderful coaching areas for working with people and helping them be able to sort of think through, what is it that I really need in this case? What is it that I bring to the table? What could be changed right where I am? If I'm not satisfied, what could be changed right where I am? If it can't be changed, and this is, I think, is really important, how can I leave well? Because you never know when you're going to be running into the same people that you're working with today in your next job.
Absolutely. So many good questions. And it makes me think of a client I was working with who was kind of done with where she was. She started looking elsewhere, and she wanted just kind of that new opportunity. And she ended up ultimately staying where she was. We talked a lot about, well, what would make where you are feel new and fresh? What do you need in your current job? What additional responsibilities? What does that look like? And how do you have an effective conversation with your manager to say, I'm feeling stuck, I'm looking elsewhere. And the reason I'm looking elsewhere is for these reasons. And I'd love to be able to create that kind of newness and that excitement where I am right now. So similar to what you're talking about. Yeah.
Something else I found when I was working, I belonged to a number of different kind of women's career groups when I was working at IBM. And one of the things that came up, we were talking one day about strengths and what kind of strengths people brought to the table. And one of the things that it became really apparent in the conversation is that people think of other people wanting the same things that they want. And one of the really important things to learn is that no, actually, people want different things in their jobs. And one of the best ways to get a group of people to work well together is to be aware that just because what you really like to do is X, that doesn't mean everybody in the group wants to do X. And so helping the people sort of figure out, well, what is it that what can they be doing where they feel most alive and most involved and most energized by what they're doing? And then maybe what you might find is that you do some shifting around of responsibilities, because one person really, really likes being thrown into the deep end of the pool and figuring things out from scratch. And somebody else really hates that. So why have everybody doing exactly the same thing? Why not figure out what's the best way of using the skills that are there?
Yeah, absolutely. And leveraging, bringing everybody up when you look at it from that lens.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think part of coaching for managers is really a discovery, of being open and willing to learn. Well, what is it that really energizes each of the people in my group, and how can I organize work in such a way that people spend maybe just a little bit more of their time being energized. So that's part of is being curious about what's actually here, and how are these people, how do they eat, how do they individually approach work. The second thing I think is really also important to mention is that coaching can help you avoid what I one of my mentors calls upward delegation. That is where your people come to you with a problem, and when they leave your office, you discover, oh, somehow that's now my problem. So coaching is a way for you to back off from taking ownership of problems that the people who work for you actually really should be the ones that solve. So instead of immediately jumping in and suggesting something which might involve you picking up some work, asking questions such as, what do you think the best next step might be to take care of that particular issue? And then wait for the person to come back. And probably the person won't come back and say, well, I think you should take it over, which is something that might happen if you start putting the solutions in yourself.
Yeah. That makes me think of a girlfriend of mine. Her dad used to always say, you want to stay away from those people who have a monkey and they put it on your back. It's
exactly.
Like, don't put your monkey on my back. And this is such an elegant way to get out of having someone put their monkey on your back by saying, hey, let's have a conversation around this. Let me ask you a few questions. And questioning and curiosity. I'm going to zip back to what you were just talking about with curiosity. And I think that is so key for managers as they lead their teams, and particularly into whatever's next. If you're an organization that still has people resigning, if you're an organization that's starting to look at layoffs, whatever is kind of the dynamic or current happening in your organization, staying curious is so important. And I think for the people who are staying in your organization, whether you've identified the key players who you want to be staying, or it just so happens that these people are part of your group, is asking, what makes you want to be here? Why are you staying? And really get a sense of what is happening so that you can have more of that. I know we talk about that in positive psychology a lot, of what's right and how do we get more of that. And so as coaches, we've talked a lot about managers having stay conversations. And so instead of having those conversations where people are walking out the door, what kind of conversations are you having with the people who are staying? Again, whether you're laying off, whether people are resigning, or whether none of that's happening, what stay conversations are you having? And finding out what lights people up. Why are you here? Why do you want to stay? What's keeping you? Those can lead to great conversations and get to what you were just talking about, Catherine, with strengths. It can help. You can kind of mold all that together, so you're getting the best out of your team and your team's getting the best out of you as a manager.
As you were saying that, Eileen, it made me think of an experience that I had back when at the end of my time at IBM, and I was working with several teams on one team I was working with was an acquisition and a native team that were put together and told to work together. And of course, they were having a lot of trouble doing it. So one of the things that I did was to go to people and ask them the question, tell me about a time when you were most successful at work, when things were just going just right and you felt really energized and happy to be here and the interesting thing was how unused to hearing that question people were, how surprising they found it to have somebody actually asking them to tell a story about a time when things went well at work. They're so used to getting together and complaining that to get together and in a group talk about when did things go well, what can we learn from that, how can that inform what we do in the future. That was a very unfamiliar thing to people to do, but very energizing.
Yeah, I love that. It makes me think of that dreaded interview question, describe a time when you failed, or describe a time when, you didn't execute appropriately, whatever it is. It's turning that question, whether it's in an interview or just in the day-to-day, to describe a time when you were wildly successful. What did you do? What allowed for that? Yeah, definitely. Right. So one thought that I'm having, if I'm putting myself in a manager's brain as they're watching us right now or listening to us, is, okay, this is all great, but how do I get these skills of being a coach? I have my profession, I have my day job, I don't have a lot of time. One thought that came to my mind, and then I want to bounce it your way to see, some things that you might share for how someone can gain these coaching skills, is get a coach. And whether, of course, we have a deep bench of world-class coaches at Silicon Valley Change, so we'd be delighted to work with you. However, if it's not us, get yourself a coach. Experiencing what it's like to be coached is, I would say, one of the best ways for you to start to embody that. I can't tell you how many clients, and I'm sure the same with you, Catherine, clients will come to me and say, oh, I was just in the most challenging, situation. And so I thought, okay, what are some of the questions Eileen would ask me? And those are the questions I asked my team. And that's music to my ears, because the work we do with our clients, we don't want it to just stick with our clients. We're trying to change the culture and change a culture of into one of curiosity. So that would be my main suggestion, is work with a coach and watch how they do it, experience how they do it, and then experiment with your team when you get back to work. Catherine, your thoughts?
That's a wonderful suggestion, and it's actually one that I think that it might be, for example, if you're an organization, you're making decisions about an organization and you want more of a culture of coaching in your management, then getting coaches for the managers and asking them both to experience the coaching, but also to reflect on the coaching, and maybe start taking notes of, well, what are the questions that really, really help me break through? And what kinds of things did I find myself really really excited by? Or when did I hear my own ideas, my own best ideas coming out of my mouth? What were the questions that made me actually have that experience? So I think that's an absolutely fabulous suggestion. The other thing I would suggest, one of the things I would suggest as people practice this, is to find something to slow them down a little bit so they don't leap into the conversation with solutions. I'll tell you, I had a manager that I worked with who was wanting to have more of a coaching relationship with his team. And he was remote. So he did, and this was back before everybody was on Zoom. So he did a lot of work on the phone. And one of the things that he found to be most successful was to keep himself on mute, because the amount of time it took him to reach his finger over to push the unmute button was just long enough for him to think, do I really need to say that? And so often his hand would come back without him unmuting. And so something that slows you down so that you actually have these like split seconds to think, is what I'm saying, is that something that is going to help the other person think through this situation? Or is this something that is going to be me putting my own shape on it?
Right.
So that would be something, a little bit of impedance in your system so that you don't jump right in, particularly as you're getting used to it. The other thing is to kind of put in your head, this belief that if you're going to offer something, that you ask permission, which may seem a little strange in the manager relationship, but it's something coaches learn to do, which is to say, would it be okay with you if I made a suggestion here? Which is to say something that kind of gives the other person a chance to say, no, I think you might be sort of, I'm kind of on a roll here, and you might be distracting me, or it might be, yeah, I'd like to hear something else go into this discussion. So this takes all of the coaching approach does take some time. Mm-hmm. So part of it might also be that you set up regular times with your people to talk. I know that Kim Cameron, who is a major professor in the positive organizational scholarship area, he does in his executive leadership courses. They actually train people to do what they call, for some reason I can remember the acronym, personal management interviews, PMIs. So personal management interviews. And they have these interviews, they're very structured, where they get together periodically and have a conversation about what's going on, what's going well, what's difficult, where might you need my support, etc. and they have these conversations. But his comment is that the instructions for doing PMIs is something that everybody that goes through their training program wants that information and takes that information back and uses it. So he also says that at the very longest to allow to go between these PMIs is a month, but it's even better if you do it either biweekly or weekly, so that you have regular meetings. It doesn't take long necessarily. One of the things that I found, I'm sort of jumping around here, but one of the things that I found is that a lot of the managers that I've worked with, if I ask them the question, well, how do you structure your regular meetings with your employees? They say, well, we just sort of get together and talk. I would make a suggestion that you actually set up a structure so that you both know what you need to share and how you're going to share it, and who's, what kinds of, to walk out of it with to-dos, mostly on employees' back, and come back and review those the next time you're together. So having a structure for having these regular meetings is a lot better than just getting together and talking about what's going on.
Yeah. Some really good practical suggestions there. That's great. I'll give one other tip and then we're going to play a little 1, 2, 3. So the other thing that I might suggest, besides you can certainly get a coaching degree or coaching certification, and that will give you tools that will be phenomenal for coaching. But again, if you don't have time for that, if you have a coach, if you practice with some of these great tips that Catherine just shared, also you can pop online and Google coaching questions and start to pluck some great questions to integrate into your regular repertoire. That might help as well. So just a few things to get you started there. So Catherine, Coaching A to Z.
Yes. I wanted to mention, this is a lovely little book by Hai-Sun Moon, which has, and it's called Coaching A to Z, The Extraordinary Use of Ordinary Words. And it's got lots and lots of questions, coaching suggestions, et cetera, in it. So it would be a great resource if people were looking for a place to get started.
Wonderful. Thank you. And you know what? I just thought too, while you shared that, Profit from the Positive, Senya Maiman's book, Senya is the owner of our company. She has her and Margaret Greenberg, who co-authored the book, they have great suggestions in there that really support being coaches as managers. So Profit from the Positive, you can find that book on our website. We have a carousel. If you go to the coaching section, the coaching page, right below all of our coaches, we have a carousel, which again, you'll see Catherine's book on there, as well as Profit from the Positive and many other books from our team. All right, Catherine, are you ready to play 1, 2, 3?
Okay.
So what is one mindset shift that you hope our leaders will take away today? Or not our readers, our listeners will take away today?
Well, I think the mindset shift is to think about developing your people and making them even better versions of who they already are, rather than trying to impose on them your sense of what a perfect employee would be. And then you will find yourself with the lovely surprise of seeing how well people actually rise to occasions.
I love that. Developing the people and kind of getting away from expectations too of how it's supposed to be. So, yep. Excellent. Number 2, what are 2 ideas or facts that you hope our listeners will take away?
Well, the first one is that if you're dealing with somebody who is anxious, one of the things to think about, Todd Kashdan talks about there being anxiety and curiosity are essentially on a slider. So if you can help somebody who's anxious about something, shift that into being more curious about it, that you will actually help them sort of be able to control the anxiety they have it. And the second one is the whole idea, and this is actually a great concept to keep in mind as you're working with people. There's something flow is an experience where you're really into what you're doing. You really, really are involved in it, and you lose yourself in it and lose track of time. It's a state that every, excuse me, software engineers know exactly what that is. They just think, oh, I just have trouble having enough time to get into it. Well, one of the things you can do as a manager and as coaching people is to help them be in what we call the flow channel. And the flow channel is where there's a great balance between skill and challenge. So if people have too much challenge, they feel really anxious. If people have too little challenge, they feel bored. So if balancing their skill with the challenge that you give them is really an important part of helping them find themselves into this ability to lose themselves effectively in work.
Oh, I love that. I particularly, all of those are so good. The one that's really resonating, because we have so much anxiety right now in general in the world, and obviously so much diagnosed anxiety too. But there's with so much uncertainty that those levels can rise. And so I love that slider and that image. That is something I am definitely going to take away with how can we be more curious and moving that slider. That's good. All right. So what are 3 plug and play, really practical? Somebody, turns off our video right now and they can actually put these 3 things into action, maybe not back to back, but something super simple to leave our listeners with.
Slow yourself down so you don't jump in with solutions before people have had a chance to figure out their own. Don't let people upward delegate to you. So don't assume that it's your problem to fix before they've even had a chance to work on fixing it themselves. And I had another idea, and I've got, approach versus avoidance. If you're working with somebody on helping them form goals, have goals where they're actually getting closer to something rather than avoiding something. So if you've got somebody that talks too much in meetings, rather than telling him to avoid talking, to avoid talking, actually encourage them to listen more, so that they have something that they're actually moving towards. Approach goals are a lot more powerful for getting people to make changes than avoidance goals. Oh, I got one more thing. Catch everybody doing something right. Yes. Catch your people doing something right and say something about it right away in a very specific way. And you will find yourself, if you actually think about doing that, you'll find yourself actually paying attention to what people do right, which is, I think, one of the first really important steps in becoming a better manager.
And becoming a better coach. Really.
And becoming a better coach, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Wonderful suggestions. All right. So as humans, we always want to know, okay, what's in it for me? So if I become this manager who is really a coach, what's possible? What's that upside that I can benefit from by doing this?
I think it's a little bit like floating downstream as opposed to swimming upstream. Okay, so if you're trying to turn the people who work for you into people that they aren't, you're going to be swimming upstream, and it takes a whole lot of energy. If you can be open to and aware of what people bring to the table and the ways that they themselves want to grow, and somehow organize that, I mean, you've got to get the job done. So you've got to use the talent that's there. But maybe one of the things that you would find out in a coaching mindset is that if you moved some of the work around, that everybody would be flowing downstream rather than trying to swim upstream.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I love that. And it makes me think path of least resistance. And that's not being, path of least resistance, which is now going to make me quote Robert Mack, where we did a webinar on managing your energy with Robert, and he talks about lazy intelligence. And so path of least resistance or floating downstream is not lazy. It's working really, really smart. And I think what you're talking about is how do you want to be the most effective manager, get the most from your people, more productivity, more joy, more happiness, all of that. It's start coaching.
Right. When you think about it, it doesn't really matter how hard you work. It's what you actually achieve. So if you're a boat in the river floating downstream, it takes a whole lot less energy to actually flow in that direction. Sometimes you got to go upstream, but you don't want to find yourself always swimming against the tide. I'm mixing metaphors terribly there, but anyway.
It's it winds well together, or it weaves well together. All right, Catherine Britton, thank you so much for joining me today. And I look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure.